At 9:17 on a Saturday morning, Emma Carter stood in front of a mirror wearing the wedding dress she had spent months choosing. Her hands were trembling, not because she was nervous about getting married, because her groom was missing. The ceremony was supposed to begin at 12 a.m. at a small countryside wedding venue outside Nashville, Tennessee. Nearly 120 guests had already arrived. Her parents were greeting relatives. The photographer was taking pictures. The florist was adjusting the last arrangement near the altar. But Daniel, the man Emma had loved for 6 years, was nowhere to be found. His phone went straight to voicemail. His car wasn't in the parking lot. His best man had no idea where he was. "Maybe he's having a panic attack," Emma's mother whispered. Emma shook her head. Daniel wouldn't do this. They had planned everything together. The venue, the flowers, the honeymoon, even the tiny handwritten vows they promised not to read until the ceremony. Daniel had always been the dependable one. He was the man who remembered birthdays, paid bills early, and drove across town at midnight when Emma needed him, so his disappearance made no sense. At 10:05, Daniel's best friend, Marcus, came rushing into the bridal suite. His face was pale. "Emma, there's something you need to see." He handed her a small wooden box. Emma recognized it immediately. It was Daniel's. "What is this?" "I found it in his apartment this morning." Emma slowly opened the box. Inside was an envelope with her name written across it. "Emma." Her heart began pounding. She opened the letter. There were only a few lines. "Emma, if you're reading this, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you myself. Please don't hate me. Everything I did was because I loved you." Emma stopped breathing for a moment. Then she saw the final sentence. "The last thing I want you to have isn't in this box. It's waiting for you at the place where we first met." Emma looked at Marcus. "What does that mean?" Marcus didn't answer, because neither of them knew. And then Emma noticed something else inside the box. A key. Attached to it was a tiny paper tag, Locker 214. Her wedding day had suddenly become a mystery. And somewhere in Nashville, Daniel had left behind one final secret. Emma remembered the place immediately. 3 years earlier, she and Daniel had met at a small coffee shop near downtown Nashville. Emma had accidentally spilled coffee on Daniel's laptop. He had laughed instead of getting angry. "Well," he had said, "I guess we're friends now." That moment had changed both their lives. 2 hours before her wedding ceremony, Emma drove there with Marcus. Inside the old coffee shop was a row of storage lockers used by local artists and small businesses. Locker 214 was at the end of the hallway. Emma inserted the key. The door opened. Inside was a cardboard box, and on top was another envelope. She opened it. "Emma, you once told me that your biggest dream was to open a place where people who had nowhere else to go could start over." Emma's eyes filled with tears. Years earlier, she had talked about opening a small community bakery. Not just a bakery, a place where struggling women could learn baking, receive job training, and rebuild their lives. But after Daniel had lost his job during a company restructuring, Emma had quietly abandoned that dream. They needed money. They needed stability. They couldn't afford dreams. At least that's what she thought. Inside the box were documents, property papers, bank statements, and a photograph. Emma stared at it. It was a photograph of an old brick building. The sign above the entrance read, "Carter's Table." Emma's maiden name. Her mouth fell open. "What is this?" she whispered. Marcus looked at the documents. "Daniel bought this building." Emma couldn't believe it. The papers showed that Daniel had purchased the property months earlier. But there was something even more shocking. He had been quietly saving money for almost 4 years. Not for a wedding. Not for a new car. For her dream. There was enough money in the account to renovate the building and operate the business for its first year. Emma began crying. "Why would he do this?" Marcus finally spoke. "Because he knew something you didn't." "What?" Marcus looked down. "Daniel is sick." The room went silent. Emma's face changed. "What do you mean?" Marcus swallowed hard. "He's been dealing with a serious heart condition for months." Emma stared at him. "No. He didn't want you to marry him because you felt responsible for him. Emma's knees nearly gave out. Where is he? Marcus didn't know, but he handed Emma one final note. If I disappear today, please don't spend your life looking for me. Spend it building the life we always talked about. Emma read the sentence again, then again, and her heart broke. Emma refused to accept that Daniel was simply gone. She called every hospital, every friend, every relative, nothing. Finally, at 4:30 that afternoon, she received a call from an unfamiliar number. Is this Emma Carter? Yes. This is St. Mary's Hospital. Her heart stopped. She drove there immediately. Daniel was in a hospital room. He had collapsed earlier that morning while driving. A stranger had found him and called 911. Doctors had stabilized him, but his condition was serious. When Emma walked into the room, Daniel opened his eyes. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Emma whispered, You idiot. Daniel smiled weakly. I know. You disappeared on our wedding day. I know. You let me think you left me. I know. Emma began crying. Daniel reached for her hand. I couldn't stand the thought of you marrying me because you felt sorry for me. You should have told me. I was scared. Emma squeezed his hand. You were supposed to be my husband. You were supposed to let me be scared with you. Daniel closed his eyes. I thought if I gave you the bakery, you'd have something to live for. Emma shook her head. I didn't need a bakery. She leaned closer. I needed you. Daniel began crying. For the first time, Emma understood. His disappearance wasn't because he stopped loving her. It was because he loved her so much that he believed letting her go was the kindest thing he could do. But Emma didn't want a life without him. She stayed beside him through surgery, recovery, appointments, setbacks, and months of uncertainty. The wedding was postponed, but it wasn't canceled. And the empty building Daniel had purchased remained untouched. Until one morning, Emma walked inside. She looked at the dusty floors, the unfinished walls, the empty kitchen. Then she smiled. We're going to finish it. Daniel looked at her. We? Emma nodded. We. 1 year later, the doors of Carter's table opened. The building had become everything Emma once dreamed about. There was a bakery in the front, a training kitchen in the back, and a small classroom upstairs where women could learn budgeting, baking, customer service, and business skills. Emma hired women who had struggled to find stable work. Some were single mothers. Some were starting over after difficult relationships. Some had simply lost confidence in themselves. Every employee received training. Every morning, Emma wrote one sentence on the bakery's chalkboard. Your hardest chapter doesn't have to be your last. Daniel's health improved, though he still had difficult days. He became the unofficial taste tester, and Emma never let him forget how much trouble he caused. Their wedding finally happened the following spring. It wasn't the enormous ceremony they had planned. There were fewer guests, no expensive decorations, no elaborate reception, just family, close friends, and the people whose lives Carter's table had touched. When Emma walked down the aisle, Daniel stood waiting. He was thinner. He was nervous, but he was smiling. When they exchanged vows, Emma looked into his eyes and said, You once thought loving me meant giving me a life without you. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Emma continued, But you taught me something. Love isn't about protecting someone from every hardship. It's about standing beside them when hardship comes. Daniel whispered, I love you. Emma smiled. I know. After the ceremony, they returned to Carter's table. The bakery was still open. Customers filled the tables. Employees laughed behind the counter. And above the entrance hung a small wooden sign Daniel had made himself. It read, Sometimes the person who changes your life isn't the one who saves you from your problems. It's the one who reminds you that you are strong enough to face them. Emma kept Daniel's original letter in a frame behind the counter. Not because it reminded her of the day he disappeared, but because it reminded her of the day she discovered that her dream had never really disappeared. It had only been waiting for her. And the greatest gift Daniel ever gave Emma wasn't the building. It wasn't the money. It wasn't even the bakery. It was the courage to believe in herself again. Years later, when someone asked Emma how Carter's table began, she would smile and tell them, "It started with a wedding that never happened." Then she'd look toward Daniel, and somehow it became the beginning of everything. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a little hope today.